Yeah. So Zoom will be where we go for the actual discussion. And Christopher and Warren, hey guys, welcome to book club. So good to be here. It's the inmates are running the asylum again. Susan is away, so it's always good times on that front. So
do you know that we're live?
Yes, we are live, Dan.
You didn't tell me that.
Yes, we are live. And today we are continuing with the .com secrets, and specifically the unboxing funnel scripts. Okay, so first, before I dive into this, I have to say that this chapter, I appreciated the level of detail that Russell went into, and I wanted to go and put the whole script into ChatGPT and actually work on it for Geek Out. It was so cool. And so it was the first chapter that I felt like it just had a lot, typically Russell is so good at giving us the framework, but he doesn't necessarily dive into the weeds. Hence why we have a whole Geek Out community, right? Where it's like, we want to dive into the weeds, but for whatever reason, this particular chapter was very weed diving, which I just really appreciated. So let me give it kind of a quick overview, and then I'd love, Dan, to hear your perspective on it, because I know you have a lot of experience in funnel scripts, which I know Jim probably pulled this script, and we can dive deeper.
Well, the one thing I was going to say is I wouldn't be surprised if, as Jim is reading through this book, is when he got to this chapter that he said, holy crap, I can turn all these into scripts.
Right?
Because this is the first one, like you said, that really just smacks you in the face. Like, it just needs a script. You plug in your answers, you plug in your inputs, boom, pop it out. That's the first one that really screams that.
Yeah. Well, and I think the other thing too, that really, it's like when I reflect back on all of the presentations that I've heard from Russell, right? Which, I mean, it's been hundreds now. He has this it wired into how he does everything. Like, now it's like, oh my gosh, every time that he says anything, it follows this pattern. I'm just like, I want that skill set, I want that ability to translate everything that I'm trying to say into this framework. And so the framework is essentially what he calls the star story solution script. And he doesn't claim credit, typical Russell, which we all love. Is he gives credit to Vince James, who gave him the structure. And then what Russell did is he basically took it and put it into his doodles and his script. So he goes into every single one. Again, this chapter has a lot more detail than all the previous chapters about the actual how. So he goes into, the very first thing is the star. And the star has these three key aspects of it, which is the pattern interrupt, the core desire, and then the agitate past failures. And I think for me, it's not that those are new words, right? Like, we've heard all of those words before, but I think the thing that I loved the most about the chapter is that he actually gives a description. So for instance, when he's talking about the pattern interrupt, or the hook being the first thing, he gives the example of, during this presentation, I'm going to show you how weird niche funnel, or my weird niche funnel that is currently making me $17,947 per day, and how you can ethically knock it off in less than 10 minutes. But first, I have a few questions for you. So again, like, just seeing that example, because we've heard that before, right? But just highlighting, like, this is the part that is specifically the pattern interrupt part in the star aspect. Super, super helpful. And then the next one is the core desire question. And that is, example could be like, have you ever wanted to work from home, own your own business? Come on, you know that you want the lifestyle, the one that everyone talks about. So again, it's the need to provoke curiosity, or to, kind of add, ask that core desire, get at that core desire. And then he goes to agitate past failures. So it's like, so why hasn't it happened for you? Come on, admit it. And again, I think it's so smart. And again, it's not that we haven't heard this before, but I had just kind of forgot about this part of the framework, or the detail of this part of the framework, which is just really fun. And then finally, it goes into the big promise. So, which is this, he goes into, by the time you finish this video, you'll change forever. I'm going to reveal to you, and then the big promise here. And again, I'll go ahead and pause here. That's just the star part. And the one thing I can't wait to actually talk about with the fellow geeks, and that is that this is all about you as the attractive character, right? And it's about your pattern up rep, the core desire that you found, and agitating that past desire and the big promise you're making. Where a lot of times we hear like, oh, make the customer the hero, right? And so, and we know like from McCall's thing of, you know, depending on your leadership style or your attractive character style, how this might change. But all that to say, at least in the star model, it is about you as the attractive character doing that pattern interrupt, doing the core desire, and then agitating the past and making the big promise. And that's the first part of the whatever it is that you're giving. And that was the cool part is like he says, whether it's a webinar or on stage or in a sales funnel or in a conversation, it's all the same. And you could say it in 3 seconds or you could say it in 30 minutes, but it follows the same framework. Okay, let me pause. Did you get anything else from that, Dan, on the star part?
Well, I look at it really kind of from a 30,000 foot view in that if you look at this, you got star, you got story, and you got solution. And it really just follows along with Russell's hook story offer. Mm-hmm. And the entirety of the text in here that he's speaking, that he would speak in a sales letter or something like that, the entirety of it is, I mean, it's seriously like 5 or 6 lines of text. Yeah. That's all it is. You could rattle this whole thing off in easily 2-3 minutes at the very, very most. So if you think about it from the standpoint of a sales page, this is basically the text above the fold. This is your headline, your attention line, your headline, your subheadline, and some bullet points. And, you know, a call to desire, click the button, move forward. Whereas I think once we get into the story part is more like the VSL. That's playing next to the click button. And what also made me think of here with the pattern interrupt at the very beginning, and also when we get over to the high drama in the story, it reminds me going back to John Benson, who was the inventor of the video sales letter. And that's where he always said to start off with that pattern interrupt. Start off with a picture of a goldfish is his example that he used all the time. Start off with a picture of the goldfish, get somebody's attention. And there's really 2 points in here where you do that. You do it at the pattern interrupt level, but then you do it at the point of high drama at the beginning of the story. Because in Russell's example, it's, you know, he bunks, you know, hits his head under the desk when he's grabbing the phone to get yelled at. And, you know, it also goes into the, you know, Russell learned this from his buddy who gave him the term 2 Comma Club. I forget what his buddy's name is. And then, but also Catherine Jones, where does she start? She starts at the point of high drama. Yeah. You watch the second Star Wars movie. Where does that start? It starts with the big battle scene with the walkers going through the snow and getting shot up by the spaceships. And so it follows that perfect story pattern. Haig, the story writer guy. So it follows that perfectly. And if you really look at it, it follows the perfect webinar as well. Yeah. So it's just essentially a different way of presenting the perfect webinar. This first part here, the star, you're introducing the star. Well, what is that? That's your intro part. That's your vehicle false belief in the matter of just like a couple of, 4 or 5 sentences. That's all it takes.
Yeah. Well, and I think that the best advice that Catherine ever gave is it's not just how you start the story, but it's also when you're crafting the story, right? You want to start at the point where you had the peak emotion, because that emotion will then carry you through in the telling of it. And that's what I think is so cool, just that it also captures people, but it also helps you to write better stories if you start at the place where that emotion was at its peak and try to tap back into that emotion, which again, Russell endlessly surprised me at his ability, because he must have told a lot of his stories millions of times, and he still is able to tap into the emotion and convey that emotion as he's telling the story. That is not an easy thing. And well, he does it so well.
It's the old thing, and I got to let a dog out here in a second, but it's the old thing about you're going to be tired of your stories long before your customers will. Yeah. Or you're going to be tired of your stories long before 90% of your customers will even register the story in their brain. They may have heard it once, but they're not going to remember it. And you've already told it 100,000 times, and you just got to keep telling it.
Yeah, so true.
Your story. And I'm going to turn off my camera here for a second to let a dog outside.
No worries. Let's go into the story part. And this is where I'm going to try really hard to just talk to you about what's in the book and then leave the conversation for the geeks at the end, because this is probably one of my favorite topics right now. So in the book, he has a breakdown of the story. And the story does start with high drama. Then you go into the backstory and you hit a wall. Then you identify the problem. You have this epiphany. You declare that, you're independent of that. And then your path to find the ultimate solution. You find a couple different solutions. You try them on. You realize there's a giant conspiracy in what you find and that it's actually a big lie and it's not your fault. And then you start to throw snowballs at the common enemy. And then you have this rapid growth. You have case studies and then hidden benefits. And so this is the story pattern. Now, one thing that I think is really interesting, and again, he did it just like the first part where he gives lots of examples. He gives a script that you can plug and play into, which I know I'm gonna have a lot of fun like plugging this into GPT and trying it out. But I think one thing that's really interesting in that you're going to actually see a lot more about story coming from Russell, and that is, so at Mastermind in Paradise, he is starting to test out so he has a lot around the hero's journey, right? We all know that he's talked about the hero's journey. And when I'm saying the hero's journey, I am talking about, the original one that was made by Campbell, and then later the one that was popularized for more like movie and theme. So like everyone, hears about what's it called? Star Wars, and how like the creator of Star Wars talked to Joseph Campbell, and he based a lot of the movie arc around the Joseph Campbell's version of the hero's journey, right? I think there's other versions that have come out from there, but it was originally from Joseph Campbell's work. Now, if you are an uber nerd like myself and want to geek out about story, I've actually been doing some research on story arcs and understanding the different story arcs. And so looking forward to having that conversation with everybody afterwards. But in addition, I think that from Russell, he's going to continue to dive deeper and give us more gems of really breaking down the story as it relates to the hero's journey story arc, right? And so, even if you see in his solution or in his story, the doodle he has, it's very close to the hero's journey, but I wouldn't be surprised if he modifies it slightly to align even more with the ways that he's sectioning off the hero's journey. So super interesting. And I think that whole section is going to just continue to expand, and he's going to keep giving us more on that front, which is exciting. Okay. And then finally we get into the solution. And again, the solution, he has a really detailed breakdown of exactly what goes in there with the formal introduction, the pain and the cost, the ease, the speed, so that you can benefits. And then it goes into the social proof, make the offer. Doesn't this sound like the way that you'd structure a funnel? And then make the offer, build the value, price anchor, and then if all, pleasure and pain, and then you reveal the price, and eventually you go to the guarantee, you inject scarcity urgency so that you can do a fear close, and then future pacing, call to action, and eventually the post selling, the takeaway selling, and the close with a reminder. So that is as you're making the presentation of the solution, which again is also another one that I really appreciated the level of detail that Russell went into on this particular one. It made me want to run and plug and play our stuff into this framework, which Dan and I have been having a really good heated discussion about the Geek Out Academy and like, is it clear and how do we make it more clear? And so again, it made me want to come back to this script and plug and play as like a test case. So super interesting, super cool. But that pretty much summarized the chapter for today. Dan, anything else that you want to add on the solution and the story part?
Well, yeah, the part that really catches my attention in the story part of this is the conspiracy, big lie, it's not your fault. Because how many times are you sitting there watching TV, got the radio on or whatever, and you hear that exact same thing? It's not your fault that you can't lose weight. The government is doing this to you because they want you to be fat. So-and-so is putting chemicals into your whatever, and it's causing you impotence or whatever it is. It's not your fault. It's ubiquitous. It's funny. It's been around forever. And to this day, it still works.
Yeah.
Because people actually want to put this onto somebody else. They don't want to blame. Nobody wants to take the blame for the fact that they're screw up and they're not getting anywhere in their life. I mean, nobody wants to do that. So yeah,
Or
when
it
you say
could be
it's not their fault,
legitimately that it's not their fault as an alternative option.
well, yeah, so make it somebody else's fault, then you go, oh, okay. So I can take all my past sins and I can be absolved of them and push those over there. And now I can take this pill and it'll solve everything.
Well, I
Well,
don't think I have another alternative though of how that plays out in my world. So like that it really truly isn't their fault, right? And that is so I'm trying to come up with okay. So in my world, especially when we're doing design, right? I oftentimes tell users and customers, it's not your fault. It was designed poorly, meaning like it's not clear. It violates some way that the human brain understands things, or it doesn't have the right thing to like grab onto the thing to do, right? I mean, we all seen the Far Side one where the guy's like, pushing and the sign says to pull, but on the door, it doesn't have a door handle or like any way to actually grab it, And so there are a lot of cases where it's not your fault. Like you know what I mean? It wasn't designed well. It wasn't meant for you to easily understand it or for you to easily grab hold of it. And so there are legitimate cases of it's not your fault that I think actually sell better than I'm just getting you off of the ownership you need to be taking.
well, maybe. But my particular one was, basically weight loss. And yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
It may or may not be your fault. But the other thing I was going to say about the solution at the end here is if you go back, well, I mean, first off, this is what he's got here for the solution is his end of the perfect webinar. This is the last half an hour of the perfect webinar. But where all this really comes from is old school long form sales letters. All the best of them. I got drawers back here full of these old newsletters or sales letters, I should say. And it pretty much follows this here. This is the Dan Kennedy format right here. If you ever want to know anything about Dan Kennedy, this, for the most part, he probably created most everything on here.
And you're talking about the solution part, right? Are you talking about the solution part, Dan?
Yeah, the solution part.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's, so you can, I mean, everybody knows that one in copywriting is, so you can, or so that, it's just a tie together. You get this so that you can do this. And it's just a way of basically connecting two thoughts, a benefit with a feature. And so either way, a lot of that is, it's old school, and that doesn't mean it's bad. That means it works.
Yeah.
If we always say, if you see an ad that's running for a very long period of time, model it because it's working. Well, guess what? This type of a long form sales letter, whether it's on a piece of paper, whether it's on a funnel page, or whether it's in a presentation, whether this format or the perfect webinar format, whatever, the reason why they do it is because it has worked for 100 years and it's going to continue to work.
Yeah.
Because people haven't changed. That's why the whole it's a lie, it's a conspiracy, it's not your fault thing works, because people have not changed and they're not going to.
Now, one thing that is interesting, and I'll just throw that out there, and then maybe this could be the wrap up and we can go into discussion, is so I work in a space oftentimes with people who there's two classifications of them. The first classification is that they are coaches, coach creators, SaaS owners, but they're working in a space where they're trying to help people with what I call the infinite game. So, and that's not my term, that is coined long before me. Simon Sinek probably made it popular, but it's things that don't have a clear, tangible result, right? So it's not like I'm going to get this result, right? It's a forever game. Like there is no result. You're in it. Like the goal of the infinite game is that you just stay in the game, And so a lot of times what I talk about with them is that we don't talk about results. When we're talking about infinite game, we talk about the frameworks that you can get, or the habits that you can try to work on, or the processes that can now be infused into your day-to-day, or the modifications are like how you can check on that you're doing, you once were doing this, but now you're doing that. So it's more about the process assessment than it is about the outcome assessment. And I think that there's a rise of this because there's a rise in people who are trying to provide services that are about the infinite game, that are not about these tangible, like I'm going to get you from A to B, And so I really wonder if there is a potential upset on the rise for another way to look at it when it's not as concrete, right? I think the framework still applies. I just think a looser interpretation of the framework is on the horizon in the masses. And then I think the second thing is that a lot of the people who I work with they generally have a discomfort with marketing speak, right? And I think a lot of the old ways of marketing can be seen as kind of over the top manipulations, and that's why we got this whole like slimy marketing or it feels icky, right? And I think that there are people who are challenging that a little bit. So if you look at like Jenna Kutcher or Amy Porterfeld or Marie Folio or Tends to Be All Females, Andrea Lita, like these are all entrepreneurs who are highly successful, who are like taming down the marketing speak a little bit and are still uber successful. So again, I think it's not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think the framework is really good, but I'm so looking forward to the different permutations of it so that it's not quite as like in your face old school marketing, and it'll be interesting to continue to dive into that in our discussion. But before we peel off, Dan, anything before we peel off for all the folks that are watching? And hi, Grace.
No, I thought we were going to do the OTO script too, but I guess not.
No, that's next week.
Yeah. Okay. I thought presentation funnels for next week.
I think, let me look and see. Let's just double check.
Well, the big uptake on the OTO, in case we were supposed to talk about it this week, is basically don't end the sale. Just because you made the first sale, don't end the process. Basically, keep it going. And I mean, especially with a lot of Russell stuff now, is Danny Walsh, who will be interviewing tomorrow. He brought up the fact that on an OTO page or on a thank you page or confirmation page or something, about basically taking the person and bringing them back to your original offer or bringing them back to your OTO or whatever. And I noticed then, as I funneled hacked 3 or 4 different challenges over the last couple of days, that's exactly what Russell's been doing, including all the way back in October, and I missed it, is that once you get to the thank you page, if you didn't take the VIP, they try to send you back to the VIP to buy that thing again. But then also in a lot of the stuff that they had been doing, I haven't seen it so much lately, is basically you buy something and immediately they put you into a page with a video on it with the intent of getting you to go into the next funnel. Mm-hmm. So you watch that video is basically a reverse squeeze page. You watch the video, you get excited about what's on there, you click the button and boom, you're way into the next funnel. And you don't even realize you did it.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of good reasons why not to end the sale. You don't get to the next page and you go, oh, congratulations, you're all done, because then the pressure's off. You go, oh, that was really great of you, but all the really smart people who bought A also bought B, and B's on this page here. And so you can take a look at that too. I mean, it's no different than if you're on Amazon and, you're looking at a bottle of vitamins and you go, oh, yeah, and the people who bought this also bought this, and this at the bottom. Oh, crap, I got to buy all those too. So I got to be like all the rest of the cool kids. I got to buy those too.
The social pressure. Yeah. And you're right. OTO script is a part of this week's reading. So thank you. I think that with respect to OTO, he also does a really good job of, in this one, just like the last one, of breaking it down with a really good script. I will say that the most helpful information I ever got about a really successful OTO, it came from an Inner Circle event, and one of Russell's go-to copywriters were talking about what the most common OTOs are. And he said that the best OTO is either more of the same or do it faster. And it's not a completely separate offer, which we've heard a lot from, like, if you watch Steve Larson, right? He used to teach us, well, what's the next problem that you create with your solution? Then the OTO should be that. So there's a little bit of a difference of opinion there. And I think if you look at, like, I was just recently studying Eileen Wilder's, and it's more like Steve's, right? Where it's like the next problem they have, that is the OTO. But it's not, I guess it's per the guidance of, like, the copywriter I heard it in our circle, or what I think we are learning in the OTO here. And that is, it's more of the same, right? Or which is really good for e-com, or it's do it faster, which is really good for more like info services or coaching services.
Yeah, well, you definitely don't want to do more of the same if it's an info product. And Russell has a very famous story about where none of his OTOs are working, and a buddy of his calls him up and it says, "Yeah, because you're just selling more of the same."
Right.
Yeah, I think it was with his 108 split tests or something like that.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like, well, we did 108 split tests, and the next thing you're going to buy is 109 more split tests. I forget exactly what he was selling. That was not it, but it basically was the same product. And you already scratched that itch, and so no, move on. What other problem do they have? What's the next problem? What's the problem you just created by giving them this one? And so that's always the thing. And I guess really the best way to test a lot of that stuff, if you don't know, is A, put out a product and see if it works or not, and B, talk to your peeps, because you drop a product on 50 people, and then you gotta query them and just go, okay, what now? Basically, what problem did I create by giving you this product?
Yeah.
Now you have this problem. Okay, great. Now I got to solve that one too.
Well, and that's where the conflicting information is, right? Of whether it's more of, do it faster or solve the next problem. It'd be interesting to hear, if that has evolved or changed, especially as we see like a couple different techniques that are coming out with 2.0 in terms of what they're doing on OTOs. So it'll be a good one for conversation in the group. Yeah. But awesome. Okay, we are at 12:30. Thank you guys so much for joining us on the Geek Out Book Club. We're going to peel off to have a discussion with all of our Geek Out Academy members. We also have a big week this week, and I'm going to go live in the group and talk to you guys about what's going on. So we have been very hard at work at trying to kick off our Geek Out Academy membership area. We've heard from a lot of you guys that the membership stuff is the stuff that you want. So how to design it, how to build it, how to craft that experience. And so we're starting to come out with a lot more programming around that. Now, the good news is that if you're in the Geek Out Academy, you already have access to those workshops. Those are happening. Made the announcement this week or this morning in the Geek Out Academy group. And then I'm going to make an announcement here in our Facebook community so you guys can hear about what's happening. If you're not a part of the Academy or you're dancing around the fiery bush and you're not sure if you want to join, we will have an availability for you guys to actually join on Friday if you want to just purchase a one-off and get the experience of it. So and this Friday, we are going to focus on the sprint experience model, which I'll talk a little bit more about when I go live later today. So but until then, thank you guys all so much for joining us. Love book club, so fun. And now we're going to go and geek out on the discussion. So thank you guys so much. We'll see you guys over in the Zoom to all of our Geek Out people.